Now we have our second speaker, Navneet Kapoor, and I'm sure we are going to have a very insightful discussion with Navneet as well, and learn from him and his collaboration experiences at Maersk. Welcome, Navneet. I hope you're doing well.
Hi, Sidhant. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing good, Navneet. Great. So, Navneet, the first question that I had for you is how do you think companies should think about the business models for maximum collaboration? And in which areas of the ecosystem do you think we could or we should be looking at collaboration?
Yeah, Sidhant, that's a very important question, especially given the importance of technology today for most companies around the world, if not all, and the importance to business models, because business models are tech-enabled models today for the most part. So I think as companies think about collaboration, there's firstly, it's important to start by recognizing where does technology fit within their scheme of things. And for most large companies today, or companies going through some kind of transformation, tech is core to their future. And if that is the case, then I think companies need to build a strong muscle for technology within. A few years back, maybe a decade or two back, there was this notion of tech as a commodity, and a lot of the relationship then between the ecosystem partners was very transactional. You throw something over the pond to a vendor in India, they get the work done, you throw it back and you deploy it. Hopefully it works. If not, you iterate. I think that cannot work anymore given how critical technology is to the future. So companies need to have a strong tech muscle from within, which means a lot of core development, core IP is often residing now within the companies. But you can't do it all alone, and that's why collaboration is so important. And I think the two dimensions of collaboration for me that are critical. One is with your ecosystem of partners or so-called vendors or suppliers. You need to have a much more strategic relationship with them, because your availability or your reliability of capabilities, your responsiveness, your ability to wow the customer depends on your entire ecosystem being enabled at that level. So it doesn't work if only the systems you own within or the capabilities you own within the company are operating great, but your ecosystem partners aren't there, or vice versa. So you really need a very strong strategic partnership to say, how do we solve for the end customer of the company that's in that relationship, right? Together, and making sure that the needs of the customers are transparent and shared with your ecosystem partners, versus being handed out in a transactional manner and some artificial SLAs being created just in a transactional manner. I think that needs to change dramatically. So you need to bring your partners closer to your customer and closer to what great looks like. I think the second part of the equation is with the startup ecosystem, again, or in general, the innovation ecosystem around the company. There's no way we can develop everything within. There's no way we can keep pace with everything that's happening around us. So companies need to keep learning from their ecosystem, especially from the innovation ecosystem. So whether it's investing in startups, whether it is partnering with startups, whether it is looking into new innovation opportunities, accelerator models, all of those are par for the game today, and companies need to figure out what works for them. And it can vary dramatically, right, from corporate venture-led efforts to accelerator models to a strategic partnership with a handful of startups or new age tech companies. So again, the big framework phrase I want to use here is strategic. You need to be intentful, you need to be more strategic, and you need to recognize that your success is a composite of the success that your capabilities reflect, but then also of your ecosystem partners. Interesting, Navneet. So you mentioned a couple of different types of players, right? You mentioned tech service providers, you mentioned startups as well. So in your mind,
or in your experience, what type of problems or challenges are each of these ecosystem groups best suited to solve?
Yeah, again, it may vary a bit by company, but I'll speak a bit. I'll speak in a more broad brush, generic sense here. Again, I think from my lens, since given technology is so important for most corporates, you need to be kind of owning the core IP that differentiates you from your competitors, or that creates nonlinear value creation with your customers, right? So those are areas you need to own more strongly. I think from a vendor perspective or a service provider perspective, it's leveraging them to augment your staff, or leveraging them for niche capabilities, or leveraging them to build stuff that you do not want to put your own resources around or your own talent around. And that would be a really nice sweet spot. Often you can leverage them to kickstart an initiative before you build a team around that for the long haul. Right? Okay. So those are kind of flavors to think about. I think from a startup or a pure innovation play, it's looking at what can help accelerate your roadmap. So if something's on your roadmap, but that's not prioritized for this year, could you bring in a startup partner that could help accelerate that roadmap by bringing some of that development from the next 2 years out into this year, or so on. Also, it's a great way to test out new ideas, new hypotheses in a more frugal manner or a low risk manner. So that's another flavor of that partnership. Some companies are also taking big bets and saying, look, for example, if I am in logistics, green energy is very important for us. It's the future. Do we partner more strategically with the innovation ecosystem out there and make longer term bets versus small test and learn projects? So those are all different kinds of flavors that are emerging, and it depends on the needs of the company, where they are in the transformation journey, how mature they are. But all of them are going to be true in one way or the other for the broader set of companies out there.
Got it. Thank you so much, Navneet. Navneet, you mentioned two things, right? And both are very important. One is, how do you create more strategic partnerships, which means, not just use either of these parties for tactical areas. And you also mentioned different types of ways to collaborate. I want to just go a step deeper and actually ask you what kind of different partnership models, or if you could name like the most important, or in your mind, the partnership model that has worked very well for you on both the sides, on tech service providers and for startups. It could be different models, but what has really worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at our company, AP Moller Maersk, right, we are a digital logistics company that's connecting and solving the end-to-end supply chain needs of our customers. So reliability becomes very important for us because it's very important for our customers. Visibility is important because that's important for our customers. Removing operational friction becomes very important. So we need our strategic partners, let's say if it's a service provider, let's say in the network area, I need my network availability. We operate in 120 different countries, multiple ports and around the world. We need a very robust network. So that partnership has to be very, very strong. We're doing a lot of work in IoT, for example, because we have assets. We are an asset-rich company. So whether it's vessels, containers, it's warehouses, we want to be listening to data from all of them, and we need to partner with companies that can help us accelerate that journey rather than building everything ourselves. So those are the kind of partnerships I was referring to, but they have to be strategic. They need to understand where we're going, what our 3-year roadmap may be, right? What kind of investments are we willing to make? What kind of investments are they willing to make in this? Because if they make investments in this area, it's probably good for them, for their broader business as well. Being a market leader, we have that, opportunity space that we can create for our service provider partners. So I think that's the kind of partnership we need to foster more and more of, in addition to the more tactical ones, which is, hey, I need 100 Java engineers to augment my team to execute a large project, for example, which has been a more traditional model. I think with the startups, as I said, we at Maersk, we have a engine called Maersk Growth, through which we engage with the startup ecosystem. And we have a flavor of the corporate venture capital arm, where we actually are one of the largest investors in the supply chain startups around the world. And that's a great way for us to learn what's happening what's new out there. But then we also, within the Maersk Growth umbrella, have more of an accelerator model to say, are there startups that we could partner with that could help accelerate our own roadmap over the next few years? But again, if you see the flavor of both of these is strategic, intentful, making sure that it's led right from the top. We are shared view to the next 3 years, shared view to the customer needs. There's a cultural element to this as well, as we heard in the previous session. Right? It has to stem from a culture of trust and partnership rather than one of, hey, what have you done for me yesterday?
Right. Interesting. I'm really also very curious about all these different models that you've had. I'm sure there are some ups and downs. Any challenges that you faced or learnings that you had from any semi-failures you might have had that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we've had, for example, working with startups, is not having enough clarity on our side. So at Maersk, we kicked off a startup partnership or startup accelerator called Ocean Pro a few years ago. And we got great ideas, both from startups in India as well as in China. And we actually learned a lot working with them. They helped us move the agenda forward. The challenge we saw was there wasn't clarity as to who's going to own and run with the ball on our side. So while it's good to experiment and try out new things, when it comes time to scale, are we really set up for that? Are we really investing in startups to work through their cybersecurity capability so that they can pass the filters we have in place? So just the right structures within large corporates can be challenging, and not having those can create challenge. And making sure that you're thinking about those kind of things, and you have people who can run with the ball once it's once something is ready and it's ready to be tested out. The other learning is we need to be more hands-on involved in this co-creation rather than looking at somebody just doing something on the side and then coming back to us after 4 months. So those are a couple of learnings from our experiences.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Navneet. I think you mean the handoff from experimentation to scaling at the business technology and to the business side. I think those are very interesting problems you mentioned. Great. One last question. I'm sure we can go on, but we seem to be running out of time. Last question is about the future. The current times are even more unpredictable, more volatile. In this scenario, where do you see the future of partnership? Do you think it will change a bit, or you would go deeper in certain areas, or go wider across the board through the players? What is your point of view on that?
Yeah, so I think the world's really changed around us over the last 2 to 3 years. Right, COVID's kind of shown that work can happen from anywhere, and it's leveled the playing field as far as geography is concerned, for example. So today, most companies have now the option and the opportunity to leverage partnerships from around the world, and also to look at them differently. So in the past, there was a view that you can only do certain kind of things out of, let's say a geography like India, and you can do certain things out of US or Europe. And I think we have busted the myth around that in the last 2 to 3 years. So in many ways, it opens up the space completely again and says, without those so-called barriers in our minds, how do we look at these partnerships? So how do we look at startups from emerging economies differently? How do we look at service providers or partners from the emerging economies differently? So take geography or so-called barriers of that we've created, that everybody has to be co-located or certain roles had to be sitting next to the business. Those myths have been busted. So I think it's a level playing field. It's a great opportunity. There's the investment in tech is only going to go up and up. So there's also a scarcity of demand, and then a whole new way of working. We saw the Great Resignation happen, and then we had the tech collapse more recently. That's playing out a little bit in the short term because of a variety of factors, inflation rates, and so on. So there's so many factors at play that it creates an opportunity for us to relook at what we may have kind of just assumed as the de facto model in the past.
Great. Excellent, Navneet. I think those were some really good points you shared. Most important for me were having each partnership being strategic. Don't use them for stopgap, not for hands and legs, either a tech service provider or startups. And second most important point, which I think you mentioned, was especially in these turbulent times, how do you look at going at building more trust within the organizations to look at it, and of course having a system and a governance mechanism to ensure that what you're building together can achieve scale, so that it is a bigger organization-wide understanding as well. Great. Thank you so much, Naveen, for these very insightful comments. I'm sure the audience has learned a lot. I personally did, for sure. Thank you so much, Naveen.
Thank you, Sidhant. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Over to you, Justin.
Thank you, Sidhant. I'd like to thank both our speakers, Navneet and Gail, for that engaging discussion. And of course, thank you, Sidhant, for chairing that session. Well, with that, we conclude a very interesting first half of our sessions for the day. You heard leaders talk about partnerships, roles of technology in creating value and revenue impact. They also touched upon the changing expectations for leaders today and the imperative to have business acumen along with sound technical skills. We now break for the networking zone for the next 1 hour. We'll see you all back here by 1:45 p.m. sharp for an interesting and power-packed afternoon session. Please do take a minute to fill in the feedback forms which have been pinned on the chat window and also in the lobby area. And we'd love to hear from you on your experiences, your learnings in areas where we could improve. Also, please make sure that you make the best use of this great chance to connect and interact with your peers across industries and companies. Our networking zone has great features, so please do explore them. We'll see you on the other side of the networking zone 1 hour from now. Bye for now.